Resident Evil 4
is a majorly industry defining, not only the best Resident Evil game, but one of the best games of all time. Seriously, I'm not kidding. The gaming industry is pussy whipped by this game so hard they've released it on damn near every console out there, ranging from GameCube to Android phones.
Oh, finally! That's a must-buy.
Resident Evil 4 is the toxic relationship you keep coming back to because you love how bad they treat you. But rather than gaslighting you and kicking you in the balls, you get a kick-ass action survival horror game that makes sure you finish first. This game was so good that one of its earlier builds gave birth to Devil May fucking Cry, and single-handedly revolutionized the third-person shooter genre with its over-the-shoulder camera angle. Without Resident Evil 4, there is no Uncharted, there is no Gears of War, there is no Fortnite. Wait, hold on. The game was literally meant to take the Resident Evil formula of the first 3 games and flip it on its head, entirely redesigning how a Resident Evil game looks, plays, and feels. The primary philosophy behind designing Resident Evil 4 was to make everything new and fresh, taking you out of the more familiar city areas and moving you to a foreign European village setting. Then game director Hideaki Kamiya was aiming for a grim, moody, gothic aesthetic, and even took research trips to Europe to ensure that authentic feeling. Out of your depth, far from home, and all alone, it's up to Leon Kennedy to save the president's daughter and stop a parasite invasion. Yeah, that's right, you don't even fight zombies in this game. I mean, for all mechanical intents and purposes, they are zombies, but I've never seen a zombie sprout a spaghetti sword out of its popped head. Along with switching up the gameplay and feel, Hideaki Kamiya wanted a truly cool and stylish main character to lead the players through this foreign game in a foreign land. In the initial draft of Resident Evil 4's story, you played as Leon Kennedy as he investigated a castle owned by a distant relative, Oswald E. Spencer. But again, wanting to keep the series fresh and exciting, they opted for a new protagonist, and with that, they created the iconic Resident Evil character, Tony Redgrave. Yeah, you guys know Tony Redgrave, right? Yeah, he had that catchphrase. He was like, I'm gonna make these graves red. God, that's so fucking stupid. Alright, next. Like I said before, one of the earlier builds created the series Devil May Cry, and Tony Redgrave was repurposed into Dante, the wacky woohoo pizza man himself.
Jackpot.
They eventually fell back on Leon being the protagonist per earlier drafts and builds of the game, but rather than making him the unsure, bumbling rookie cop of Resident Evil 2, they made him the more stoic, confident, Chad secret agent version of Leon that we all more so remember now. The development of this game was very, let's say, twisty for the lack of a better term. The game traded story premises, gameplay concepts, settings, console exclusivity, and even directors mid-development. Eventually, the leading director was found in Shinji Mikami, who helped shape a lot of what Resident Evil 4 ended up becoming. But the winding road of development led us to the absolute masterpiece that we have today. And I know I'm literally some dude on the internet with barely a college degree and 0 real qualifications, but I have played the game a few times, so I do just have a little bit of room to talk. But hey, let me stop rambling and let's get into what makes Resident Evil 4 so fucking mid. We enter on a hazy, dreamlike opening where Leon recounts the events of Raccoon City and fills us in on what has happened in the time in between. We then cut to Leon in the back of a car, as if he was dazedly remembering these events to pass the time on the ride. Leon investigates a house in search of any leads of his missing person. He comes across a man and proceeds to kick him in the face. In foreign cultures, this is known as a dick move.
Sorry to have bothered you.
After more delightful interactions with the locals, he comes across the main village. Oh, they have Burning Man here too? Leon steps foot into the village, and violence has been incited. This opening village segment takes everything that makes Resident Evil 4 great and implements it into one gameplay segment. The fear for survival, positioning and shooting, managing items, and exploring and searching for new ones. This intro is the game saying, this is what I am really. Are you ready? The game up till now has been relatively calm with a few scattered enemy interactions. Then, suddenly, everything has been flipped on its head and everyone in this village is trying to kill you right here and right now. In an instant, you switch into survival mode and begin searching for anything in the area you can use. Running into open houses, you can find crucial items like grenades, ammo, and even a shotgun that is excellent for handling multiple enemies at once. The feeling you get when the switch flips and you are the one in danger and it's up to you to keep yourself alive is the magic that makes this opening segment and the rest of the game so great. As well as showing you what the game is mechanically and tonally, it also is a great sink or swim tutorial where you have to learn how to play the game as you fight for your survival. And after fighting for your life for what feels like hours, you're both figuratively and literally saved by the bell. A wave of relief washes over you. Leon drops the hardest one-liner of all time.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
And you're met with the title card. It seems that Leon Kennedy was the evil resident all along. The opening village segment has become iconic in the Resident Evil fandom, and was sort of recreated in Resident Evil Village. As everything comes to a halt, after that intense opening act, you're left wondering, what's next? Before Resident Evil 4, the Resident Evil series consisted of 4 camera angles placed in each room and hallway with the player character standing in front of a pre-rendered background. This definitely gave those games a more cinematic, suspenseful horror action movie feel that those games were trying to emulate. But with this new, more dynamic camera angle, it puts you directly in Leon Kennedy's little big boy boots by placing you right next to him in the action, as opposed to you being more of a fly on the wall, observing an underqualified police intern save the world from a zombie outbreak. But Resident Evil 4 isn't mid because of the camera angle alone. The tank gameplay, while sort of seemingly dated today, goes a long way in making the game feel more frantic and calculated. You can't move and shoot, so you have to plan your placement and adjust on the fly when a chainsaw man comes running at you to take your head off. You'll need to position yourself and react to oncoming hordes of parasite zombies and pop their heads like a bad BBL. Oh, and for simplicity's sake, I'm just gonna call them zombies from now on. Tank controls have been a mainstay at this point in the Resident Evil games, playing into that stress of survival and feeling underpowered and challenged in every encounter. This is actually where the split between Resident Evil 4 and Devil May Cry happened. Hideki Kamiya wanted to do insane shit, like give the main character machine guns and a mechanical arm and have them use swords. Capcom took one look at it and they were like, while this is some of the coolest shit we have ever seen, you're a little too far off from Resident Evil, friendo-chan. So they just made it its own game. Anyways, Resident Evil 4 makes you stand your ground and face your fears of the danger standing right in front of you. But in exchange for making you stationary while shooting, they make the enemies slower and more grouped together. But that doesn't mean they'll bite the curb so easily. The zombies come equipped with pitchforks, knives, flails, scythes, shields, and projectiles like crossbows and throwing axes that can be shot out of the air if you're skilled enough. They will also try to dodge your shots as you aim at them, and if they get close enough, they will slash, grab, and decapitate Leon.
Yeah, not sure how many green herbs it's gonna take to fix that one.
This immediately sets them apart from the run-of-the-mill bullet sponge zombies from the first 3 games. Other than the change in camera, this is the most standout change in the established series formula. Adding this twist to the gameplay makes each encounter feel tense and challenging. And as opposed to other survival horror games where wasting your resources is detrimental, Resident Evil 4 gives you just enough ammo and items to kill any enemy you come across, but not too much where you'd ever consider wasting it. This encourages the player to engage in combat rather than just running past enemies. The game also adds an adaptive difficulty mechanic that will tweak the difficulty slightly by removing some enemies from an encounter if you are struggling and die in an area a few times. Along with the base grunt zombies, there are special enemies that will be thrown into an encounter that require special strategy to defeat. Like the blind Gyarados, who have shredding Wolverine claws and have to be led by sound so you can shoot them in the back on their weak spot. Or the Calmelos, a canine enemy that will beeline it towards anything it wants to kill. You need to react fast and aim right to take them out before they snack on your delicious Leon hair. Wait, what? And the most terrifying of them all, the Regenerators. These homegrown test tube babies are unkillable. You're welcome to dump your entire stock of ammo into them if you want, but they'll just keep getting back up. Instead, what you have to do is acquire the thermal scope for any of your sniper rifles and shoot them in their weird bug cores. This will stop them from regenerating and finally kill them. Fighting the Regenerators is like trying to find hay in a needle stack, in more ways than one. There's a dedicated side mode called Mercenaries mode that puts you in an area with waves of enemies coming at you, and you have to score points and survive for as long as possible. If you think you have a grasp on all the different enemy types, feel free to test your mettle in Mercenary mode with a variety of characters and weapons to make shit explode like the action hero you are. But enough about the enemies, let's talk about the main man himself, Leon Roundhouse Kennedy. Leon has a stack of guns at his disposal, ranging from pistols to shotguns to SMGs to sniper rifles, and a single-shot RPG that one-shots any enemy, allowing you to basically skip any boss that's giving you trouble. But it'll come at a heavy price. Along with your guns, you have grenades like a frag grenade, a stun grenade, and an incendiary grenade. These are excellent tools for crowd control and buying time to line up the perfect shot, or to make a run for it. Leon comes equipped with a standard issue military knife for close quarters combat and opening boxes, as well as his basic army CQC combat training, such as a fucking suplex and a roundhouse kick that can destroy zombies with the sheer power of Leon's quads. You can buy new guns and attachments for your guns at the merchant like sights and stocks. Along with weapons, you can buy consumable items like grenades, ammo, and healing herbs/sprays. Now, I know the merchant looks like he'd be standing outside an elementary school with his hand a little too eagerly on his trench coat and sounds like a pirate, but trust me, you just hear me out on this, okay?
Thank you.
We are given zero information on this guy throughout the entire story of the game, and that creates this aura of mystery that, while endearing me to his character, gives me more questions than answers. Who is this person? Why does he follow me from area to area? And where is he keeping all this weaponry? He has multiple shotguns under that jacket. But regardless of all that, he still helps you. In a world where everything is trying to kill you, this stranger offers you his hand to ease your venture through the shadow. He will become your best friend throughout your playthrough, with his illuminating blue flames marking a safe area where you can collect yourself, restock on supplies, and ready yourself as you prepare to face the nightmare that lies ahead.
What are you buying?
Consider that coming to the kids.
What are you selling?
Nothing.
The merchant has become so iconic that he's even still being referenced in modern Resident Evil games.
What are you buying? Just something an old friend of mine used to say.
When you buy an item from the merchant or pick it up, it goes in your suitcase, aka the best inventory system ever created. Your suitcase is essentially a grid where each item takes up a certain amount of squares, so you can physically go in and organize your suitcase to make more space. This is, personally speaking, one of the most satisfying game mechanics of all time. I couldn't tell you how long I've spent sorting my case, lining up the ammo type by type, placing all my healing items next to each other. Everything had a place, and when my case was messy with new items, it felt great to take a moment to myself and organize this little box of shit that I'd collected. Outside of direct gameplay, progressing through the game and exploring the different areas, seeing what the game has in store next, is immensely satisfying. Each step further into the darkness is more addicting than the last. The game moves seamlessly from set piece to set piece with almost too many to count. The iconic village opening scene, fighting the Lake Ness monster, the house shootout with Luis, the battle with Krauser in the ruins, the fight with Sadler on the shipping deck, and the final jet ski escape from the island explosion. The game just has this hypnotic flow that entices you the more and more you play, constantly keeping you engaged, constantly giving you new and exciting encounters, constantly showing you new and interesting things. The soundtrack plays a big part in the flow that you enter while playing the game. The game does have its moments of silence, mostly when exploring a new area. The tracks that do play consist of classic edge-of-your-seat horror tracks and slow, swelling and calming harmonic tracks. To say the story is great would be more of a stretch than Mr. Fantastic's Foreskin. The divide being the difference between plot and story. Plot being the actions taken throughout the journey, and story being what those actions mean in the grander narrative. Resident Evil 4's plot is ludicrous and incredible, but I'm not really sure how Leon fighting a giant robot and jumping through lasers adds to his arc. The story of this game is Leon saving the president's daughter from a European zombie cult. No shit, it's campy, but it's meant to emulate classic action and horror movie tropes like Alien, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Terminator, and Jaws. The characters are all classic tropes as well. The attractive CIA informant, the femme fatale, the monologuing villain, the wisecracking action hero main character.
No thanks, bro.
It's all there, but despite them being directly inspired from these tropes, I still really like all the characters. Leon is genuinely great. I love the subtle detail of him still being a dork, but thinking he's cool with his corny one-liners and Riz? ? Like, you know the game is going to be pure cheese when this is the hardest and most quoted line from the game. Ashley is a bit annoying. She's not even completely terrible, she just lacks agency and is very much playing the damsel in distress role. Regardless, she is still a prominent character throughout the game and even has a dedicated gameplay section all for herself. It's definitely worth noting that she is greatly improved in the Resident Evil 4 remake, but we'll talk about the remake in a little bit. While I'm talking about Ashley, I should bring this up. Yes, a good amount of this game is an escort mission, but it is not nearly as bad as you may be thinking. While Ashley lacks agency in her character, she does not in the battlefield. Ashley will duck under your shots if you aim near her and moves behind you when using your knife. You won't be killing Ashley by accident unless you actually try. And around more lengthy, difficult combat areas, you'll find dumpsters for Ashley to safely hide in while you deal with the enemies. Just think of her as a mix between Mario from Yoshi's Island and Ellie from The Last of Us. The most annoying thing about escorting Ashley is her getting dragged off by an enemy and you have to drop everything you're doing just to save her. She's not that bad, I promise. Ada is sort of interesting in the base story, but she's absent for a lot of it. Ada's story gets expanded and contextualized in the Separate Ways mode, a secondary side story where you play as Ada and shows what she's been doing behind the scenes while Leon is on his mission. Like how showing Ada was the one who rang the church bells that lured the zombies away from Leon in the opening village set piece. There will be some places you come across as Leon and think, huh, that's interesting, I wonder what happened here. And then you see what happened through Ada's story. Ada is very similar to her Resident Evil 2 counterpart, the manipulative double agent who strings along Leon throughout the whole story. But she has a grappling hook, so yeah, she's cool. She's
the bitch in the red dress.
Luis is a scientist who works in the lab that made the Los Plagas virus, and for some reason dresses like an Italian cowboy. He's a pretty popular character in the fan base, but I don't really have too much to say about him. He's fun to have around, but doesn't add a ton to the experience. There are some cool sequences where you fight with Luis, but other than that, he's not really a standout. Okay, now here's my shitty transition to talk about the bosses. The more notable ones being El Gigante, a giant parasite zombie? Jesus, where do they feed that one? They're just supposed to be villagers, right? Yeah, not really sure about the logistics with that one, but it's still a great fight. Using his hulking size, he will punch, grab, and throw entire trees at you. The goal of this fight is to shoot him enough so he starts crying, then run up his arm and slap his noodle. But the most memorable thing about this boss fight is the dog. The dog you saved from the bear trap at the very beginning of the game comes back to assist you in this fight. You did save the dog, right? What? You didn't? What? You fucking monster, get out!
Get the fuck out!
Another notable boss is Verdugo, a straight up xenomorph. Like, who are we kidding with this one? You can literally freeze it. This boss fight switches the game dynamic by removing the horde of zombies and placing you in a one-on-one where you become the hunted. While you are vastly outnumbered, you should generally speaking have little trouble taking out the enemies. But Verdugo is different. Verdugo stalks from the shadows, climbs on the walls and ceilings, and is completely bulletproof. Once you finally enter the elevator to leave the room after avoiding it for what feels like eternity, you finally escape. Until it comes back! Trapping you in a maze dangled over a bottomless black abyss, you have to work your way through this apparatus before it gets dropped into the depths. Verdugo eventually transforms into its bigger form without its armor, leaving it vulnerable to attacks, becoming the standard shoot it till it's dead type fight. But I really like the staging and subversion this fight has. At first you think it's just another enemy that needs to be put down, then you realize you aren't the hunter anymore, you are the prey. And after escaping by the skin of your teeth, after thinking the terror is finally over, it comes back with a vengeance. The last boss I want to talk about today is Major Jack Krauser, purely just because I think he's cool. His fight is somewhat similar to the Verdugo fight, working your way through an area as the enemy prowls around you, eventually culminating in a one-on-one fight to the death on the rooftop. Leon's portable armory versus Krauser's weird blade thing and sick backflips. You win, of course, because you're Leon Kennedy and you're awesome and you're totally not a lame poser.
And you totally have a girlfriend. She just goes to a different school. Guys, I told you this 1,000,000 times.
Okay, I know I just spent 6 pages of this script happily sucking this game's dick, but I do feel like I need to briefly bring up the few issues I have with this game. Leon's hands are kind of shaky when aiming, and this can make some combat encounters where you're down to your last bullets a bit frustrating. Just come on, just hit him! Having to open your suitcase to equip/use any weapon and item is kinda whack, but it does give you a brief moment to strategize during a stressful encounter. And finally, I think the last section of the game on the island kind of drags a bit. I do like the island and lab section, but I sort of think the game would be better if it was just 1/2 village section and 1/2 castle section. Okay, that's literally everything.
Back to sucking.
This game feels cold, like the disc was cursed with an eternal fall wind. You ever wonder why Leon's jacket disappears after that first level? It's cause I yoinked that shit. This game makes me chilly. Each environment has an atmosphere that feels dead and unwelcoming. The landscape looks physically ill with its dead trees and rotting buildings, and a color palette of brown, yellow, and gray. In the village section, there's almost this beige fog that not only sets the vibe, but for some reason makes me feel like I've been to those woods. Granted, I spent a lot of my childhood playing in the woods, so maybe I'm just reminded of back then. The beige fog reminds me of the piss filter in Metal Gear Solid 3 that was also used to add to the visual style and set the tone, albeit a dramatic tone rather than horror. The setting of being lost in desolate woods with danger coming from any and all sides is much more terrifying to me than a horde of zombies overrunning a city, mostly because it's more of a real fear rather than fear born out of fiction. I could talk about the woods all day, but this video is already long enough, so let's keep it rolling. It's like the world itself is saying, "We don't want you here. Leave or you will die." And the world, of course, is trying to kill you with bear traps, tripwires, and fucking snakes hidden in boxes. You smack it open expecting a coveted healing item or some bullets for your empty gun, but instead you're met with 2 poisonous fangs and 5 pounds of cold, unfeeling reptile flesh. The locations in this game are insanely varied, but the main sections of the game consist of the village, the castle, and the island lab. Leon's trek through Europe is littered with interesting destinations and local hotspots, such as Ye Olde Shitting Well, the most intense roller coaster in all of Europe, and Wario's Gold Mine. The levels themselves are so well designed. The Resident Evil games are notorious for backtracking and puzzles, but I never feel lost or confused when traversing a level. The conveyance of where to go and what to do in these levels is a massive part of what makes progression so good when you're playing the game. On your first playthrough, you get the satisfaction of feeling out and successfully navigating a level, and on the second, you feel like a pro flying through each level using your mental map of the level and all of its secrets. This is also just a neat detail, but there are certain points in the world that you can interact with and get Leon's internal thoughts on what he is observing. Just a cool little thing that wasn't really needed in the game, but the devs took the time to include it anyway. I am a complete sucker for GameCube/PS2 era graphics. They have such a beautiful simplicity to them that invokes a simpler and more nostalgic time. Modern games have sort of fallen back on graphical fidelity and don't really strive to have unique art direction that can stand the test of time. Games now all have that overly polished cinematic style that makes every game blend together and is so boring. I don't mean to knock modern graphics too hard, they are a technical marvel, but it's just led to this lack of visual uniqueness in games. The lower res textures and polygons so sharp they could give you a paper cut just give the game such a charm, and even by today's standards, still look very impressive. Even though Resident Evil 4 has been ported to every console known to man, it has still received 2 separate remakes, one being entirely in VR. The Resident Evil 4 VR remake on the Quest 2 is a 1-to-1 remake of the base game entirely in VR. I don't have a ton of VR experience, but even I can tell this is a great VR game. With stellar physics and dynamic interactions, you can tell the team who worked on this were huge fans of the original and dedicated to making the best VR experience they could. I have, however, played the 2023 Resident Evil 4 remake, and it has come close to beating the original in terms of quality in my head. Resident Evil 4 Remake takes everything good and bad about the original and shifts it into a modern context. The tank controls are swapped for a more modern style of shooter movement, while still maintaining the roots of the original. Weapons can be switched on the fly, you can move while shooting, as well as some additional movement options. Leon now has a crouch he can use to fit into small spaces and duck under enemy grabs, as well as a knife parry that can be used to deflect enemy attacks and projectiles. The parry feels like such a natural addition to the moveset, it makes you wonder if it was in the original and you just forgot. Leon also has unique animations and callouts for his reloads and using items. A lot of the enemy encounters have been remixed, with enemies being in locations differing from the original. The developers over at Capcom knew people had dedicated themselves to this game, Resident Evil 4 being their most popular Resident Evil release with over 13 million copies sold worldwide. So by mixing up the enemies, it shows they understood what needed to be done to make this a fresh experience for players new and old. One simple change catches the player off guard and makes them cautious for the entire game, not knowing what else has been changed or what to expect. The characters are slightly updated as well, Leon being less of a dork and more stoic and traditionally heroic.
Now, say, you got a smoke?
You know, those things will kill you.
Ashley is greatly improved by being made more likable and given more agency, as I mentioned before. Ada and Leon's relationship is a bit more stern and serious, with Ada being a bit more antagonistic and Leon taking his betrayal at Raccoon City a bit more seriously. Krauser is given a bit more context in the story by showing him training Leon in the opening cutscenes, so you have a bit more context when he shows up later and you know who he is. The graphics do shift more into that cinematic style that takes away greatly from the tone, but still looks amazing. Like, you can literally count the hairs on Leon's head. That is insane. Cosmonaut Variety Hour has an excellent video going more in depth about the remake, so go check it out if you're interested, link in description. Resident Evil 4 is more of a game to me. It's an experience. It feels like a sliver of this unique bygone time in gaming captured in a single disc. Or you know, on a digital download. The game, despite being cold and unwelcoming, embraces you with warm open arms every time you play it. The game knows what it is and what it wants to do. It wants to be a schlocky horror action game, but also wants to be fun and played over and over. But if you haven't played it before, I greatly encourage you to give it a go. And if the dated graphics and gameplay seem too daunting or troublesome for you, try the remake. Please, just experience what this game is and what it has to offer. It truly is a masterpiece. 5 out of 10, mid as fuck. Hey, it's Will in the post-edit. I just wanted to give a huge shout out to Annie Mood for providing the gameplay in this video. I did not have time to record it myself, but their full long play will be linked in the description below. I also wanted to quickly just say thanks for the response on my last 2 videos. Honestly, those have been much more well received than I ever could have imagined, so again, thank you. I do have one more thing coming up. Keep your eyes out, you know, this is a little something to keep you titillized. Here it is.